I was in that moment in the group of Ukrainian negotiators. We negotiated with Russian delegation practically 2 months, in March and April, the possible peaceful settlement agreement between Ukraine and Russia. And we, as you remember, concluded so-called Istanbul communique. And we were very close in the middle of April, in the end of April, to finalize our war with some peaceful settlement. For some reasons, it was postponed. But to my mind, Putin, this is my personal view, Putin in 1 week after started his aggression in 24 February last year, very quickly understood he did mistake and tried to do everything possible to conclude agreement with Ukraine. And Istanbul communique, it was his personal decision to accept the text of this communique, which totally far away from the initial proposal of Russia, ultimatum proposal of Russia, which they put before the Ukrainian delegation in Minsk. So we managed to find a very real compromise. So Putin really wanted to reach some peaceful settlement with Ukraine. It's very important to remember.
The sequence, just so I get this clear, the sequence is, did you go to Istanbul?
Yes.
So you came back with the negotiating party?
Yes, completely. Yes, it was successful. We opened the champagne bottle, you know, for this because
you actually opened a bottle of champagne in Istanbul.
Yes, because it was completely successful negotiations.
Why did it not happen?
I don't know. Nobody knows because mid-agreement in Istanbul came back for the Kiev, and after Bucza, we heard from President we stopped the negotiations. A lot of people say the Prime Minister Johnson came in Kiev and declined these negotiations with Russia, but I don't know exactly is it true or false. This is a problem.
The Prime Minister Boris Johnson definitely did come to Kiev at that time.
Yes,
but
he came to Kiev, but nobody knows except I think Mr. Zelensky and Boris Johnson himself what they spoke about. Because
what do you think? Do you think Boris Johnson was involved?
I don't know. I won't even say yes or not because it's very sensitive questions.
Just so I understand, then, was it that the troops withdrew and that the horrors of Bucha became visible during that time? They didn't actually take place during those days. Is that right?
They getting out probably, I don't remember exactly, on the 2nd of April. And I was in Bucha next day, and in these 5 days. But we are the members of negotiations group, was provided by we stopped any negotiations. When we ask how it could be getting back, the president says somewhere, sometimes, not now.
So something changed in Zelensky's mind during that period.
Yeah, absolutely. And historical have to find answer what has happened these 5 days.
And do you think Russia was sincere that they would have stuck to that negotiation settlement, the intention, as you call it? Do you believe that you could have done that deal with Russia and they would have stuck to that deal?
Russians shows their readiness for still providing negotiations. We decline.
Этот проект этого договора был парафирован руководителем переговорной группы из Киева. Он поставил там свою подпись. Вот он. Он есть. Он так и называется. Договор о постоянном нейтралитете и гарантиях безопасности Украины. Именно о гарантиях, о которых вы сказали, уважаемый друг и президент Южноафриканской Республики. 18 статей. Более того, к нему есть еще и приложение. Они, знаете, сейчас даже не буду об этом говорить. Они касаются и вооруженных сил, касаются других вещей. Все прописано до единиц боевой техники и до личного состава вооруженных сил. Вот этот документ. И он парафирован киевской делегацией. подпись стоит. Но после того, как мы, как и обещали, отвели войска от Киева, киевские власти, как обычно, делают их хозяева, выбросили это все на свалку истории. Скажем так аккуратно и постараюсь интеллигентно выражаться. Они отказались от этого. Где гарантии, что они и дальше не будут отказываться от каких-то других договоренностей?
President Putin actually sent a draft treaty that he wanted NATO to sign to promise no more NATO enlargement. That was what he sent us. And that was a precondition for not invade Ukraine. Of course, we didn't sign that. So he went to war to prevent NATO, more NATO close to his borders.
Flashback.
This is fundamentally not about NATO expansion.
It was never about NATO enlargement.
It's not about NATO.
It's not about NATO expanding toward Russia.
This was never about NATO.
It's absolutely nothing to do with NATO expansionism.
And it has nothing to do with NATO.
This is not about NATO.
They told Gorbachev, we promise that if you agree to a reunited Germany and NATO, NATO would not move, this was Secretary of State Jim Baker's formulation, 1 inch, or maybe he said 2 inches, 1 inch to the east. In other words, NATO would not move from Germany eastward toward Russia. And it did. To, as we speak today, NATO's all along Russia's borders, from the Baltics to Ukraine to the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. So what happened? Later they said Gorbachev lied or he misunderstood. That promise was never made. But there's an archive called the National Security Archive in Washington. It has now produced all the documents of the discussion of 1990. And it was not only Bush, it was the French leader Mitterrand, it was Margaret Thatcher of England. Every Western leader promised Gorbachev NATO would not move eastward. So what do you end up with today? What Russians call predatorstvo, betrayal.
Wir sind uns einig, dass nicht die Absicht besteht, das NATO-Verteidigungsgebiet auszudehnen nach Osten. Das gilt übrigens nicht nur in Bezug auf die DDR, die wir da nicht einverleiben wollen, sondern das gilt ganz generell.
This transcript, released by the State Department, proves U.S. officials understood that the non-extension assurance that they were talking about, which Genscher said they were in full agreement with, applied to all the other eastern countries too.
How would the Americans react if we placed our missiles on the border between Canada and the United States or on the Mexican border? Not a single inch to the east, they told us in the 90s. And what do you know? They cheated. They just deceived us blatantly. 5 ways of NATO expansion. And there you go. Now in Romania and Poland, weapon systems appear.